All right, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. This is Series 3, live number 4. How does bias impact your interactions in the workplace? Now, I am not going to lie. This is a difficult topic. It's a complicated topic. And I don't normally have a lot of notes for these lives because I just like to talk off the cuff in case you haven't figured that out. But I had to sit down and really write some notes, or this is going to be a 2-hour webinar. This is a big topic, and it is one that we all need to be working on. I hear people say to me all the time, I don't have any biases. I'm not a biased person. Well, let's just get that out of the way from the beginning. We all have biases, and we're going to talk about that today. Bias in the form of discrimination is a $64 billion lawsuit business in the US. And I call it a business because it has taken on a life of its own, but there's a reason for that. $64 billion a year in settlements for discrimination. We have a problem. And those are just the ones that get reported because they can be substantiated. Think about all the ones that aren't and all the things that we're going to talk about today. And I want to talk today about the things that come up in the workplace that often aren't associated with big lawsuits. Not the things you hear about on the news. Not sexual discrimination or race discrimination. We're going to talk about unconscious bias. And sometimes that unconscious bias is a bit more conscious than people want to admit. But we are going to talk about unconscious bias. And we are not even going to scratch the surface because, again, it would turn into a 2-hour webinar instead of a 15-minute live. So again, we all have biases. So we always need to be vigilant and thinking about why are we doing and saying the things that we are doing and saying. So let's talk first about microaggressions. For those that don't know what a microaggression is, it's comments or actions that demean or dismiss someone for gender, race, other identity aspects. And they can range from things that are so subtle that as the receiver, you're not really sure that just happened, but you're uncomfortable, to things that are just blatant disrespect. And they happen every day in workplaces. I'm going to give you an example that's personal to me. Many moons ago, I was working in an office and I was the only woman in the group. Technology. And we would have these big meetings where those of us on the organizing committee would have to go and sit around the board table, and then there would be people in chairs the whole way around, double, triple layers, listening to what amazing words we had to say in this meeting. And the deputy CIO was the chair of the meeting. And he would start every meeting, every single week, with, "Okay, gentlemen." And then he would look at me and say, "Sorry," and go back to what he was doing. And after about 6 weeks of this, I just got fed up. And he starts with, "Okay, gentlemen," looks at me and says, "Sorry." And I looked at him and I said, "You know what? You're not sorry, because if you were, you wouldn't do this every other week. So let's just dismiss the excuses and get on with the meeting." He never did it again. But not everybody is able to open their big mouth like I do and snap back a response. If you are constantly feeling put down or intimidated, or if those comments are so subtle that you're not even sure that it's happening, but you just feel awful all the time, it's really hard to fight those microaggressions. Another one that happened to me even farther back in the dark ages in university, my first semester I was a music major, for those of you that did not know. And first semester, and I had a music history class. And I had to have this class for 4 semesters because we had to cover all the history. And the first day of class, I, along with 30 some other people, walk into the room, and for reasons that only the professor knows, he singled me out. And he looked at me and he said, "Smile." Now, on the surface, you would think there's nothing to that. But what happened at the end of the class was proof that I was right to be suspicious. At the end of the class, he stopped me at the door and he said, "I didn't make you uncomfortable when I said that, did I?" Now, if he was just saying a pleasantry, why would he need to say that? And this went on for multiple semesters. He would stop me in the hallway. He would make comments in class. He would always have some little quip about something or other that somehow involved me. This went on for semesters. And again, nothing was that blatant that if anybody had walked by and heard him, they would have been like, "Richard, not okay for you to say these things." They were just small little microaggressions that he just was constantly wearing away at me. And again, this unfortunately happens all too often in the workplace. And most of the time, the person who's doing it knows what they're doing, but there are times when they really don't understand the impact of what they're doing or why they're doing it. And that's why we all need to learn to question our motives and check ourselves. So now let's talk about things that I do to myself because of how I want to be perceived. I find myself quite often telling people my age. Now, we're taught, especially as women, you don't ask somebody their age. That's rude. But I find that I insert my age into conversations quite often. And a couple of weeks ago, I did it. And after I got off the call, I had a reflection about the call. And that popped into my head. And it had never really popped into my head before about why I said this. Interestingly enough, it was the same week as my birthday. So maybe that's why it was in my mind. But it popped into my head that I did this behavior a lot. And the reason I find myself doing it is because quite often in conversations, both professional, unfortunately, and personal, people say to me, "You don't look 50. I don't actually know what 50 is supposed to look like. I mean, is there a book where there are pictures of people at 20, 25, 30, 50, and you're supposed to look like that, and you're supposed to have a certain amount of wrinkles, and your eyebrows are supposed to... I don't know. If that book exists, nobody ever got it for me for a present. But there's this thing in our minds that people have, that people are supposed to look a certain way when they're a certain age, or they're supposed to act a certain way when they're a certain age. And because people are constantly telling me I don't look my age, maybe they're muttering behind their backs I don't act my age either, different topic, but because they tell me all the time that I don't act my age, and my profession is very much based on the wisdom and the life experiences that I bring to the conversation, I find myself constantly telling people my age. Because I feel like I need to justify my experience and be able to explain why I'm qualified and capable of doing the job, and that my age is part of that. Another one, let's talk about where one of my biases creeps in. I really have a hard time with people who wear a lot of makeup. I don't know why. Maybe it's I didn't grow up with it. But I find that if someone is wearing a ton of makeup and has overstyled hair, I immediately rush to judgment. And the judgment that I rush to is that somehow this person doesn't have a lot of intelligent information to bring to the conversation because they're more interested in troweling on the makeup, and yes, I've used that phrase a lot, instead of the subject matter. There is absolutely no scientific data to back up my opinion, but it's just something that just snaps in my head. All right, we have already gone 11 minutes, and I have not even gotten through half my notes because this is a huge, huge topic. It is also the reason that we spend several weeks on it in the leadership program, in the group coaching program. And before this call, I was thinking, I have a couple lessons I want to take out of Power Up Your Team Collaboration and make this a bigger part of it. Some other things that I want you to think about, just some statistics or details. There is a huge amount of emphasis placed on age, weight, height, hair, and dress, beauty and appearance. And those are some of the more innocent biases. I don't know that that's the right word, but those happen really quickly and we don't even realize it a lot of times. But here are some statistics. 48% of African American women and 47% of Latina women say that at some point they have been mistaken for administrative or custodial staff when that was not their position. Another one, in the US, less than 15% of men are over 6 feet tall. Trust me, I know this because I'm 6 feet tall and it's hard for me to find a date. Personal information there. However, 60% of CEOs are at least 6 feet tall. Think about that one. People who have African, Asian, or Hispanic names are 5 times less likely to be called back for an interview, or even called in the first place if they're just looking at the paper. So this age, weight, height, hair, and dress, those things happen every single day, all day long. And so my challenge to you as I wrap up before this does end up becoming a 2-hour webinar is think about those 5: age, weight, height, hair, and dress. The next time you make a decision or a judgment, and what I want you to do is ask yourself, why did I just make that decision about that person? And I'm not saying that bias is creeping in, but get in the habit of asking yourselves, why did I just make that decision? One study found that when hiring managers were asked by human resources or the recruiters why they chose to pick a candidate or not pick a candidate, when they had to explain their rationale for hiring or not hiring someone, they found that about 18 to 20% of the time when they were asked to justify their decision, it wasn't really based on the merit of the candidate. So think about that. We're not asking people these questions, but if we did start asking, why did you pick or why did you deselect this candidate, and we asked people to start explaining their reasons, they were finding that 18 to 20% of the time, the reasons did not have anything to do with the candidate's capability or their ability above or below other candidates. I'm going to leave you with that thought because we are actually over time. Next week is live number 5 in this series on leadership. And we're going to talk about authentic language. And I'm going to give you an exercise to do that you can use to practice when you're talking to someone or when you're writing an email to make sure that what you're doing gets your point across the right way and is being received the way you want it to be received. So I know this went long. If you have questions or comments or concerns, post in the chat or message me directly, and I'll be happy to give you contact details to reach out to me, because this is a big topic. Check out a group called leanin.org, because on their website they have tons of resources about bias in the workplace, and they have exercises you can do, workshops you can lead. And if you are interested in this topic and others related to leadership, go to learning.agilityforall.com, and we have a free pre-launch sign up for the leadership course. No obligation to take the course, but I'll be giving away some free leadership resources until we launch the course in the new year. So again, huge topic. Thank you so much for joining, and I will see you here next week for how to use authentic language in your communications. Bye, everybody.